At Christmas, I was working a double shift in the ER. My parents and sister told my 16-year-old daughter there was no room for her at the table. She had to drive home alone and spend Christmas in an empty house. I didn't make a scene. I took action instead. The next morning, my parents found a letter at their door and started screaming. On Christmas Eve, I got home around 11:45 at night, dead on my feet. I'd done compressions on a man who insisted he was just tired. He was also blue. That kind of shift. So when I saw Abby's boots by the door, my first thought was, someone's bleeding. Then I saw her coat slumped on the armrest, her overnight bag still zipped, and her curled up on the couch in that tight, awkward sleep position like she didn't trust the furniture. I stood there, waiting for the logic to catch up. She was supposed to be at my parents'. Overnight. Tradition. She begged to drive herself. Just once. Newly licensed and proud of it. She even left early to be extra polite. My husband and I were both working late shifts, so the plan made sense. Until it didn't. "Abby?" I said softly. She opened her eyes instantly, like she hadn't really been sleeping. "Hey, why are you here?" She sat up slowly, shrugged. "They said there wasn't room." I blinked. "Room where?" "At the table." Her voice cracked halfway through. She tried to cover it with another shrug. Didn't work. "They said they weren't expecting me." "That there were too many people already. Grandma said she couldn't just pull up another chair last minute." She looked stressed, like I was adding to her load. "You got there on time, though." "Yeah, right on time." She opened the door and just looked surprised, like I'd shown up for the wrong holiday. She paused. Then she said there wasn't a bed left either. There it was, the backup excuse. She said they didn't want me driving back late, but also didn't know where else to put me. So, I left. "Did anyone offer to drive you home?" "Nope." I stared at her. "Did they at least let you eat?" Another shrug. The table was packed. Lily was in my usual seat. Grandpa was talking to her like she was royalty. No one looked at me. Then Grandma said, "It's just a full house this year," and Aunt Janelle nodded. "So, I left." She glanced at the table and added, "I made toast." I turned and saw it. A single slice on a paper towel, cold and slightly bent. Half a banana next to it. That was her Christmas dinner. I felt something coil in my chest. Not anger, not yet. Just that cold, glassy feeling right before the shatter. "I wasn't hungry anyway," she said. "Not really." That's when her eyes started to fill. She fought it. God, she tried. Looked up. Blinked hard. Bit her lip like she could chew her way out of the emotion. "They made it seem like I'd imposed," she whispered. "Like showing up, after it was planned, was rude." And then she cried. Quiet and slow. Like a faucet you can't quite turn off. "I was going to bring a pie," she added. "But I thought they'd have enough food already." I sat next to her, put my arm around her shoulders. She leaned in without hesitation, like she'd been holding herself up out of spite. After a while, she wiped her nose on her sleeve. "I know they don't like you," she said. "But I thought—" She cut herself off. "You thought you were just the kid." "Not part of it." She nodded. "They didn't even say it meanly," she added. "Just like it was a practical problem, like I was a folding chair they didn't have space for." I didn't go to bed right away. I sat in the kitchen, looking at her bag, still zipped. She'd packed it so carefully, picked out the sweater my mom said she liked, brought a little tin of cookies she made herself. I opened the fridge. There was nothing special in there. We hadn't planned a backup Christmas. Why would we? We trusted them. That's the part I couldn't get over. Not the cold cheese toast or the lack of food. Not even that she drove home alone in the dark. It's that they looked her in the eyes, this sweet, awkward, brave girl who showed up on time with cookies and a smile, and told her, with 28 people inside, There's no room for you. They didn't mean no space. They meant, not you. The next morning, my husband got home. Abby was still asleep. I told him what happened. He stood there for a long moment, then said, "So what do we do now?" I didn't answer. Not yet. But I already knew. Because there's turning the other cheek, and then there's turning away a 16-year-old who just wanted to be included. And they chose the latter. I didn't make a scene. I did this instead. 2 weeks later, my parents got a letter and started screaming. I don't remember the first time I got called the weird one, probably before I knew what the word meant. When I was 6, I found a dead bird and asked if I could dissect it. Not to be creepy, I just wanted to understand how it worked. My mom slapped the kitchen counter and said, "Jesus, Kate, what's wrong with you?" My sister Janelle screamed and told everyone I was trying to build a zombie. I got grounded for scaring her. That kind of set the tone. I loved anatomy books, wanted a microscope for Christmas, asked questions about blood flow at dinner. At school, I was the one who actually raised her hand. In my family, that was enough to get you labeled a show-off. Nobody else went to college. Most didn't finish high school on the first try. I was the only one who studied during commercials, or at all. By the time I was 12, my dad had started joking, half joking, that I wasn't really his. "Too smart to be mine," he'd say. Then he'd laugh. Once, I overheard him arguing with my mom when they thought I was asleep. He asked if she'd ever cheated on him. Said he always wondered because I didn't look like anyone in the family. I didn't sleep much that night. Never asked about it. Still haven't. By high school, Janelle had perfected her role as the golden child. She was loud, likable, average in school, but excellent at turning every failure into a story. People loved her. She knew how to cry on cue and made sure everyone knew she watched out for me, the poor awkward one who couldn't take a joke. She used to call me Dr. Freak, in front of people. When I actually became a doctor, she upgraded it to Dr. Moneybags. So, progress? When I got the scholarship, the full ride, my parents were weirdly quiet. No celebration, no hug. My mom asked who I thought I'd end up marrying, since guys don't like women who act smarter than them. I told her maybe I'd marry myself. She didn't laugh. They didn't give me a cent. I waited tables through med school, took shifts no one wanted, came home with sore feet and burnout in my bones. Meanwhile, my family thought I was living the dream. They didn't visit once. Years later, after my second residency, I got the first steady job that made me feel like maybe I wasn't drowning. My husband and I met during an overnight shift. Very romantic, if you find shared exhaustion romantic, and eventually moved to a place where we could afford more than instant noodles. And that's when the calls started. "Can you help with the electric bill? Can you co-sign this lease? Can you talk to a doctor friend about Uncle Pete's back lump?" I did what I could, most of it without hesitation. When my parents were approaching retirement, way too early and with zero savings, I stepped in. They'd never owned a home, always rented. Bad credit, bad luck, whatever the excuse of the year was. So I bought a modest 2-bedroom house and handed them the keys. I told them it was a gift, that I'd handle the mortgage. The house is in my name, but they live there like it's theirs. Rent-free. Utilities? Covered more often than not. Medical stuff? I have insurance access, yes. I never said no, until recently. A few months ago, Janelle called. Lily, her daughter, the one who can do no wrong, had been accepted into a prestigious STEM summer camp. "She's got your brain," Janelle said, like it was a compliment. This could change her life. I asked how much. $1,200, she said. "But it's worth it. And you, of all people." That's where I stopped listening. Abby never went to a summer camp like that. Not because she couldn't. She just never asked. She's practical, thoughtful. She wouldn't dream of demanding that kind of money from me, even though she could have. I told Janelle no, politely but firmly. I said I was already covering our parents' mortgage, medical bills, and emergencies. That maybe she could apply for financial aid or a payment plan. Her tone turned fast. Wow, must be nice to have everything and still be so stingy. She's your niece. You're just jealous because Lily's actually going places. That last one was funny. Or would have been, if I hadn't heard my mom mutter something similar a week later when she thought I was out of earshot. Apparently, I was holding Lily back, just like I always held Janelle back, by being the smart one who made everyone else look bad. You know, by existing. I didn't fight it, didn't explain, didn't justify. I just said no, and I meant it. That was 3 weeks before Christmas. Abby was excited to go to Christmas dinner. Said she felt grown up, being trusted to drive there herself. She'd packed an overnight bag and even wrapped little presents for the younger cousins. I told her I'd see her in the morning and reminded her to text when she arrived. She did. Everything seemed fine. Hours later, I stepped through our front door and discovered Fine had apparently been canceled. Abby looked up from the couch with a wobbly smile that said, "Please pretend this isn't a disaster." She told me, in the smallest voice, that Grandma had murmured no space at the table or anywhere else, even though she'd counted 28 chairs in use. A math problem with only one variable. Her. I listened. I let her explanation thud around the room like a dropped suitcase. Then I wrapped my arms around her and let the quiet do the talking. She fell asleep still wearing the sweater she'd picked out to impress them. When the house finally settled, I sat alone in the kitchen, staring at the spot where her Christmas dinner should have been. I replayed every mortgage payment, every utility bill, every "just this once, Katie" that had become forever. They hadn't run out of room. They'd run out of gratitude, and they'd used my daughter to send the memo. That was the moment the switch flipped. No more explanations. No more polite negotiations. I didn't even bother deciding if I'd act. Only how soon. We didn't speak much on the drive over. My husband sat beside me in silence, his hand resting lightly on my knee like a grounding wire. Not comforting exactly, just solid, present. That was enough. The morning after Christmas always has that weird, fuzzy quiet, like the world still hung over on sugar and wrapping paper. I was just hoping the house would be empty. It wasn't. There were still 2 extra cars in the driveway. I recognized one as Janelle's. The other probably belonged to whatever cousin had stayed late for leftovers. We got out. I held the envelope tight. I hadn't slept. The shift, the scene with Abby, the cold dinner tray on the counter that still hadn't been cleaned up. It was all humming in the back of my brain like a blown fuse. I rang the bell. Waited. No one came. I rang again. Knocked. Nothing. "Let's just leave it," my husband said gently. I stood there a second longer, then nodded. We walked back toward the car. I tucked the envelope carefully against the door frame where it wouldn't blow away. I was opening the driver's side door when I heard it. The creak of the screen. A slippered footstep. I turned. My mother stepped out, wrapped in one of those fuzzy robes she always wore during the holidays, the kind she used to brag about getting for 90% off. She bent down, picked up the envelope, opened it, and started reading. Her face went blank, then pale. Then she screamed, "Frank!" Her voice cracked like a snapped wire. "Frank! Get out here! She's throwing us out!" My dad appeared at the door in yesterday's clothes. "What the hell?" Janelle followed, still in her Christmas pajamas, clutching a mug like she thought this was going to be a cozy morning. "What's going on?" My mom turned and pointed down the driveway like I was a stray animal that had just pissed on her porch. "You ungrateful little—" We got in the car and pulled away before I could catch the full sentence. Didn't matter. I knew the greatest hits. By the time we got home, my phone was already buzzing. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. The 6th time I picked up. "How dare you!" my mom shrieked. No hello. No pause. Not even a fake concern for Abby. You've lost your damn mind. I held the phone away from my ear. I could still hear my dad yelling in the background. If you do this, you're no daughter of ours, he bellowed. They didn't ask why. They didn't ask what happened. They didn't even mention Abby. Not once. I hung up. They kept calling. Janelle started texting. I think one message actually said, "This is going to ruin your reputation. Think of your career." Oh, honey, my patients don't care where my parents live. By evening, my phone looked like it had gone through a breakup. 32 missed calls, 14 texts, 3 voicemails. One cousin even had the nerve to message, "Not my place, but this feels extreme." You only get one mom. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. Of course, my mother. She was standing on my porch in that same fuzzy robe, holding the eviction letter, now crumpled and damp, like she'd been squeezing it for 2 hours straight. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. She didn't wait. "You're really doing this?" she hissed. "After everything we've done for you?" I let that hang for a second. Then I said quietly, "You mean the house I bought for you? The bills I paid? The health coverage I arranged because your Medicare didn't cover your blood pressure meds?" She flinched for a millisecond. Then she straightened, eyes sharp. "We raised you. We gave you everything. You didn't even let my daughter eat dinner," I said. That stopped her. Briefly, but she recovered fast. "Don't be dramatic." "We didn't have enough chairs. There were 28 people there," I said. "Even a neighbor." Her lips pressed tight. "I didn't send that letter to be cruel," I added. "But if you think you can treat Abby like she's disposable—" "Oh, for God's sake!" she snapped, suddenly animated again. "Stop acting like we're monsters. You're the one tearing your family apart over a misunderstanding, and now you're threatening your own parents?" She held up the letter like it was evidence in a trial. Then, and I swear this part felt like theater, she ripped it in half. Just stood there and tore it down the center, like that would somehow void the legal process. "There," she said. "That's done. Now if you want us to forgive you, you'll pay for Lily's science camp and drop this ridiculous tantrum." She smiled like she'd just solved the whole thing. I didn't say anything, because that was the moment I realized they hadn't taken me seriously, not for a second. Not when I was a kid. Not when I became a doctor. Not even now. To them, I was still the awkward science-obsessed girl who should be grateful for scraps and stay in her place. The girl they resented, but never truly respected. They thought I wouldn't follow through, but they were wrong. So I let my mother walk off the porch, muttering to herself like the hero in a tragic play, and I closed the door, quietly, calmly. But in my head, I was already making the next move. My mother tore up the eviction letter like it was a flyer for gutter cleaning, right in front of me, right after accusing me of being selfish, loveless, and emotionally unstable. Then she had the nerve to smile and say, "Pay for Lily's science camp, and we'll forgive you." She said, "We'll forgive you," like they were the victims. Like turning away my daughter at Christmas was some sort of lapse in etiquette instead of cruelty. 2 mornings later, I met with a lawyer. I laid everything out. The house in my name, the mortgage I'd been paying for 7 years, the bills, the dental plan, the quiet sacrifices. He didn't flinch. "I assume you want a formal eviction," he said, like it was the weather. I nodded. The notice went out that same week. 60 days. Legal, paper stamped, signature required. And this time, they couldn't tear it up and pretend it didn't exist. I kept paying the mortgage, wasn't about to let my credit die for the sake of a statement. But everything else? Gone. Utilities, cable, medical reimbursements. They got a crash course in what no support actually looks like. 2 weeks later, someone knocked on my door. It was Aunt Elaine, the good aunt. Or so I'd thought. She had a tin of cookies and a rehearsed look of concern. "Kate," she said, "I just want to talk." I let her in. I already knew why she was there. We sat in the kitchen. I poured tea. Neither of us touched it. "It just doesn't sound like you," she started. There it was. "Throwing out your parents over a misunderstanding?" she added gently. I laughed once. Not kindly. I told her about the house, the bills, the Christmas Eve betrayal, how my parents had made room for 28 people, including a neighbor and 2 cousins I hadn't spoken to in a decade, but not their own granddaughter. Aunt Elaine paled. "I didn't know," she said. "They didn't tell you," I corrected. She left like someone who couldn't unhear what they'd heard. 3 days later, I got a text. "I didn't understand before. I do now." 1 week before the deadline, my lawyer called. "They haven't moved." "At all," he said. "Then we proceed," I replied. I listed the house that same day, set a fair price, not high. I wasn't trying to squeeze value. I just wanted it over. A buyer made an offer fast. Families love that area. They just wanted it empty. "Vacant possession required," my agent reminded me. "Noted," I said. I didn't go the day they were removed. The new owners took care of it through legal channels. I heard it wasn't pretty, but what came next wasn't better. Janelle took them in. Of course she did. My sister always liked to cosplay the better daughter. She gave interviews to cousins like it was a press tour. "She's abandoning them," she said. All because of one holiday mishap. 3 weeks later, she was on my doorstep, eyes bloodshot, hair in a frizzed bun. "I can't do it," she said, without even saying hello. "They're fighting constantly. Mom thinks the living room's too small. Dad says my kids are noisy. They refuse to share a bathroom. I'm going insane." I leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. "They need a rental," she said. "You could at least help with that. Just enough for a deposit." "No, Kate." You watched her get turned away on Christmas Eve and just stood there. "That was your choice. This is mine." She blinked, then turned and walked away. A week later, she kicked them out too. They landed in a rental no one would brag about. 2 rooms, 1 heater, a front step that slanted like a shrug. Their pension barely covered rent and food. Gone were the vacations, the dinner parties, the cruise they'd been eyeing for their anniversary. They tried to call in sympathy from the extended family, claimed I'd cut them off without warning, that I was unstable, that I'd always been cold. But by then, I'd quietly spoken to the uncles and cousins, sent them copies of the bills I'd paid, forwarded the eviction letter, time-stamped and certified. One cousin just replied with, "Wow." Another sent a thumbs-up emoji. The family wasn't rushing to save them, and neither was I. 2 months later, Abby and I were sitting on the porch, sipping iced tea. No plans, no performance, just a quiet afternoon. She said, "I don't miss them, you know." I didn't either. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. I opened it, reflexively. "Hope you're proud of what you've done." I deleted it. No pause. No breath. "They'll probably text again," Abby said casually. "They always do," I said. "But they're not my problem anymore." And they weren't. They said there was no room for Abby at the table. Now there's no room left in our lives for cruelty, control, or manipulation. Fast forward 2 years. They're still in that crumbling rental, still blaming everyone but themselves. Abby's thriving now. She's studying what she loves, and the money from the house sale covered more than just tuition. It bought her peace. And me? A little bit of closure. I don't answer their calls. I don't send money. I don't lose sleep. I protected my daughter. I chose her. Finally. But tell me, did I go too far, or just far enough? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell.